the fading glow of a winter sunset on the small farm, Deep stood silently by the vegetable beds, her heart brimming with mixed emotions. The love she shared with James, the man who had rescued her from the darkness of her past, was just beginning to sprout like tender new shoots, yet it remained fragile beneath the weight of her lingering self-doubt. James, the wealthy CEO of CI Company, now faced not only the pressures of his work, but also the arrival of a new secretary, whose captivating beauty and polished professionalism stirred new uncertainties. Could their love truly overcome the barriers of class, the barbs of gossip, and the old scars of Deep's past? In the early morning at James's farm, the biting chill of winter wrapped around the dewy vegetable rows that Deep had nurtured day after day. Standing there with a grapefruit basket in hand, freshly picked from the orchard, her eyes clouded with concern as if mirroring the heavy grey clouds above, she recalled last night, the moment when she had confessed her feelings to James and received his sincere response. Her heart had been warmed, like a small flame ignited in the dark winter night. Yet deep within, a trace of fear still lurked, a remnant of shadows from her past that clung to her like the penetrating cold on bare skin. Had she truly accepted his love? And did she deserve it? As she gripped the basket tighter, memories of the painful life with Powell, her ex-husband, rushed back like a bitter, icy wind cutting through her skin. Powell, the man she had once called husband, had never seen her as anything more than a servant. For 5 long years he had beaten her without mercy. The unprovoked blows, the relentless strikes that fell like a torrential rain during drunken rages, and the cutting insults from his mother, Ma, you're worthless. If you can't bear children, then just get out, had etched scars into her soul, as enduring as the cracks on her weathered hands. She remembered the day she was cast out of the house, penniless and with nowhere to turn, save for Haki, the loyal little dog who had followed her along dusty roads, his steps as unsteady as her own. That crippling self-doubt haunted her still, making her fear that her love for James was nothing more than a beautiful dream destined to vanish under the scrutiny of daylight, a dream that would expose the gulf between them. He, a successful CEO, and she, once crushed by life's hardships. Haki scampered around her feet, tail wagging joyfully, his bright eyes as if determined to chase away her sorrow, and his damp nose softly nudged her hand. She smiled and bent down to stroke him, her voice tender. "Haki, you've been a good boy today while I was selling grapefruits, haven't you?" Securing the basket to her old bicycle, its worn-out saddle pressing uncomfortably against her cracked hands as they gripped, the chill sent shivers through her cracked hands as they gripped the handlebars. She went to the sky. The sense of returning sunset fell through her chest as they gripped the handlebars. Those sweet grapefruits from James's farm were not only her new lifeline but also a reminder of his generosity, the man who had pulled her out of despair and given her a haven amid life's storms. As she pedaled away, the biting wind brushed through her thin clothes, numbing her hands, yet she pressed on determinedly. She had to strive harder, to never become a burden to him, as her resolve burned like a small but persistent flame amid the winter's frost, even as her weary legs protested after endless days of labor. At the bustling town market, where lively chatter and the hum of passing vehicles blended with the aroma of street food, Deep parked her bicycle by a familiar stall. Gently placing her basket on the ground, she asked a nearby vendor, "Excuse me, may I sell my goods here?" The middle-aged woman with a kindly weathered face smiled and nodded. "Of course, make yourself at home." Dieppe arranged her grapefruits, their sweet fragrance filling the air and drawing admiring glances from passers-by, the plump segments visible beneath the green rind. "How much for this grapefruit?" an elderly lady inquired, cradling one in her hand with delight. "Just 20,000 dong each," Dieppe replied softly, her voice betraying a hint of shyness. The old woman smiled, selected 2 fruits, handed over the money and said, "These are delicious. Remember to bring more next time." Gratitude warmed Deep as she thanked her customer. Yet in her mind, the image of James, the man to whom she had just entrusted her heart with a tender smile, lingered like a rare ray of winter sunshine. Within less than 2 hours, she sold out her entire basket. Clutching the crumpled notes stained with the sweat of a hard morning, she calculated her earnings. With plans to purchase a watering can for the garden, she moved toward another stall on the muddy market ground. "How much for this watering can?" she asked, pointing at a modest blue plastic one, her voice trembling slightly from the cold. The seller replied, 45,000 dong. Deep counted her money, handed over the exact amount, and took the watering can with a relieved sigh, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. But as she turned back to her bicycle, a familiar figure suddenly appeared, stopping her in her tracks and making her heart nearly skip a beat. It was Pao, her ex-husband, standing there, his eyes bloodshot from drinking, a twisted, suggestive smile playing on his lips, and his tattered clothes reeking of stale alcohol. "Deep, it's been a while. You seem to be doing better now, huh?" He slurred, his breath heavy and reeking, making her instinctively step back. Deep clenched her fists, fighting to remain calm despite her pounding heart. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Pao sneered as he stepped closer, his looming figure darkening the already dim light. "I thought you were enjoying life with that rich guy, but I see you're still struggling. Come back with me, I'll take care of you." Stepping back, her voice trembling but resolute, she replied, "I have nothing to do with you anymore. Just go." Pao growled, reaching out with a rough hand, but a stranger's shout cut through the tension. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" After a few muttered curses, he stomped off, leaving Deep standing there, exhaling shakily, weighed down as if burdened by an unseen mass. The memories of his brutal beatings flooded back like an unending nightmare, leaving her trembling amid the throng of market-goers. That afternoon, Deep returned to the farm, her legs heavy from a long day's work. As soon as she stepped into the yard, she saw James waiting, his suit still immaculate, though his shoes were stained with mud, a clear sign he had been there for a while. He greeted her with a warm smile. "Deep, what are you up to?" Startled, she set down the watering can and replied, "Hi, I just got back from selling grapefruits. I was about to water the garden." James moved closer, his gaze lingering on her cracked, weathered hands, still marked with fresh scratches from picking fruit. "You work so hard," he observed, a note of worry threading through his voice. "Your hands are so rough and chapped. Are you free this afternoon? Come with me for a little drive." Deep hesitated, her eyes drifting over his sincere, gentle face. Unable to resist his earnest invitation, she softly nodded, "Yes." They got into his sleek car and James drove them into town along the bumpy country roads, the soft hum of the engine a soothing accompaniment to the rural afternoon. Sitting beside him, Deep gripped her canvas bag tightly, her mind a swirl of uncertainties, as if stirred by a restless lake. Was her shabby, worn-out attire really acceptable? Sensing her insecurity, James offered a gentle smile and said, "You look beautiful. Don't worry about it." His words made her cheeks flush and her heart flutter, easing some of the self-doubt that had long haunted her. Their first stop was at James's timber company. Lynn, his new secretary, was already waiting at the entrance. With her long, lustrous black hair and a polished, professional air, Lynn's confident presence made Deep feel momentarily small in comparison. Lynn greeted James with a respectful, "Good morning, boss," and James turned to introduce Deep. "This is Deep, someone very important to me." Lynn smiled warmly, her curious eyes passing over Deep with genuine kindness rather than condescension. "Nice to meet you," Lynn said sincerely, leaving Deep both surprised and comforted by the friendly welcome. James then led the two into his cluttered office, where piles of reports and documents were spread across an old, scarred wooden desk, a testament to his relentless work. Pointing to a shipment of newly received timber, he asked Lynn, "Is this today's order?" Lynn nodded, explaining in detail about the supplier and quantities, her words flowing with the assurance of someone well-versed in the business. Deep listened quietly, finding the figures and technical terms overwhelming, making her feel like an outsider in his vast world. But when James turned his gentle gaze back to her, soft and reassuring like the full moon on a clear night, she realized he never intended for her to feel left out. "Deep, let's get going soon," he said, then turned to Lynn. "Are you free to join us?" Lynn agreed, and the trio left the office, stepping out into the gentle glow of an early afternoon. As they climbed back into the car, Deep offered the front seat to Lynn, opting to sit in the back so as not to disturb their arrangement. "You should sit up front," James insisted kindly. "I want you to be comfortable." Deep shook her head with a soft laugh. "I'm fine in the back." Although he did not push her, his eyes continued to follow her through the rearview mirror with genuine care, silently affirming that she held a special place in his heart. Their next stop was a small, charming shop in town, where colorful shelves lined the space invitingly. James led Deep inside, his hand gently resting on her shoulder as a wordless gesture of encouragement. "We need to get you some gloves and a scarf," he said firmly, leaving no room for refusal. Deep hesitated. "I really don't need them. It's too expensive." But James wouldn't listen. He chose a light blue knitted scarf and carefully draped it around her neck in a gentle manner that showed he feared startling her. "It looks perfect on you," he smiled, his eyes lighting up with affection. Deep lowered her gaze, feeling the warmth of the scarf radiate through her, yet deep inside a familiar insecurity stirred. She wondered what she could possibly offer in return for such kindness. While Lynn took the car out for a quick wash, leaving James and Deep in the store, Deep's thoughts danced between gratitude and self-doubt. When she returned, James invited her to join him and Lynn at a small cozy roadside cafe. The cafe, adorned with a faux Christmas tree in one corner, exuded a gentle winter charm amid the cold night. James ordered a black coffee for himself, taro milk tea for Deep, and herbal tea for Lynn. As Deep sipped her drink, its delicate sweetness spread through her like a quiet reassurance. She thought to herself, "I've never been to a place this lovely, all because of him." While Lynn chatted with James about work, numbers and plans flowing smoothly from her lips, Lynn suddenly turned to Deep and asked, "Deep, have you and the boss known each other for long?" Deep hesitated, then in a soft voice replied, "We are just getting to know one another." With a warm, friendly smile, Lynn added, "I can tell he cares about you a lot. You're really lucky." Deep lowered her eyes, lost for words, her heart a tangle of emotions. Lynn continued, "James doesn't see you as just any ordinary friend. He truly loves you." Those words sent her heart into a sudden flutter, stirring up both joy and trepidation, leaving her uncertain whether to celebrate or to fear the depth of his feelings. On the drive back to the farm, James drove in silence, his headlights casting long shadows on the rough dirt road, as Deep sank deep into thought amid the stillness of the winter night. When they finally arrived, darkness had fully settled, and the soft glow of an oil lamp flickered through the window like a tiny flame defying the dense night. Hackey bounded out from the corner of the yard, tail wagging energetically, and a small bark echoing like a warm greeting against the chill. Deep bent down to stroke him, her cold hand brushing his soft fur. "Hackey, you must be thirsty, huh?" Behind her, James's deep voice broke the silence. "Are you making dinner tonight?" Deep nodded, motioning toward the bubbling pot of stir-fried vegetables on the stove, its steam carrying the rustic aroma of fresh greens. "Come eat with me," she offered. James smiled, as he rolled up his suit sleeve to help her water the remaining vegetable bed under the soft glow of a lone hanging lamp. As he bent down, Deep noticed that he had carefully removed his expensive glasses and watch, placing them on a scarred wooden table next to other old, worn marks, a quiet testament to the hardships she had endured. He did not mind getting his hands dirty to help her, she thought, as a profound warmth spread through her, seeping into every corner of her soul like a gentle spring breeze breaking through a harsh winter. Dinner was simple yet heartfelt. The soft light from the oil lamp illuminated the vibrant green vegetables and steaming bowl of rice, its warmth gently softening the cold around them. Seated across from Deep, James carefully served her vegetables, each tender leaf falling into her bowl like a silent expression of care. "Your cooking is wonderful," he said sincerely, his eyes sparkling with genuine appreciation as they reflected the flickering lamplight. Deep lowered her gaze and murmured, "Thank you," her voice as soft as the whisper of wind through the trees outside. But within her, a tidal wave of repressed emotions stirred, those long-held thoughts she had hidden away, now surging forth like a deep current disturbed. She had once believed that he only pitied her, but now, looking into his sincere, uncalculating eyes, clear and bright as a cloudless sky, she found the courage to speak. "I'm sorry. I used to think you merely pitied me. But now, I realize I love you." James paused, his eyes widening in surprise, then softened into a gentle smile reminiscent of moonlight over a tranquil pond, effortlessly dispelling the shadows in her heart. He reached out, grasping her hand firmly, and the warmth from his touch melted the chill from her weathered fingers, as if promising that the winter's cold would soon be overcome. "From the very first moment I met you, I was captivated by your kindness and strength. I don't pity you, Deep. I love you," he declared. His words struck her like an arrow, piercing through the fragile shell of her self-doubt and dissolving the last remnants of her past wounds, like ice melting under the tender warmth of spring sunlight. Deep smiled through tears that glistened like precious gems under the lamp's glow, tears now of happiness and liberation from the haunting memories that had once imprisoned her. Suddenly, the sharp ring of James's phone shattered the quiet, a piercing note that sliced through the tranquility like a knife. He frowned as he answered, his tone subdued. "Now? Fine, I'll check it and call back." Turning to Deep, his eyes betraying a trace of regret, he added, "I have some reports I need to review tonight. I have to go." Deep nodded, trying to hide the flicker of disappointment in her eyes as she softly said, "Be careful, on your way home." With a gentle smile, James then mischievously asked, "Oh, by the way, could I get another roasted corn? I found it so delicious earlier." Deep's laughter, bright and clear as a chime in the still night, filled the small house as she hurried to fetch a freshly roasted ear from the stove, a wisp of smoke rising from its charred husk. Be careful, it's still hot. Good night, she said, handing it over with a trembling hand warmed by affection. Holding the roasted corn, James glanced at her one last time before getting into his car, his eyes lingering with a look of tender longing, as if he wished to imprint her image in his memory forever. As his car disappeared into the thick, foggy night, Deep stood quietly on the porch, overwhelmed by a cascade of new, unfamiliar emotions, like a warm river flowing through a once frozen heart. I've found true love, she thought, clutching the scarf he had given her, its soft fabric a constant reminder of his presence, a lingering warmth in her small, humble home. Beside her, Haki wagged his tail, his bright eyes fixed on her, and his damp nose softly brushed her leg, as if sharing in the joy of that precious, fleeting moment on a cold winter night. Yet the newfound love between James and Deepe was about to face another challenge. James's father had discovered his son's relationship with Deepe, a woman who had once been nothing more than a slave, and was silently monitoring them through Lynn. Would he ever accept Deepe? Or would he do everything in his power to tear them apart? All will be revealed in episode 17.
Cô kéo cô ra khỏi địa ngục ấy bằng lòng tốt và sự kiên nhẫn. Vậy mà trái tim cô lại run rẩy, không phải vì hạnh phúc mà vì nỗi sợ hãi rằng tất cả chỉ là sự thương hại trá hình. Diệp dừng lại, tay nắm chiếc lá rong đến mức nó nhàu nhĩ. Cô tự hỏi liệu mình đang tự dệt nên một giấc mơ không có thật. Giam với dáng vẻ lịch lãm của một CEO giàu có và cô, một người phụ nữ nghèo từng bị chồng ruồng bỏ. Hai thế giới ấy làm sao có thể hòa hợp? Trong sâu thẳm tâm hồn, cô khao khát được yêu thương, nhưng nỗi tự ti như một bức tường vô hình ngăn cô lại. Cô thở dài đặt chiếc lá vào gùi, rồi tiếp tục bước đi, mang theo cả hy vọng lẫn hoài nghi. Tại phiên chợ nhỏ của thị trấn, Diệp bày bó lá rong ra một góc đường nơi dòng người qua lại tấp nập.